Amen. Take your Bibles, open up to the book of Proverbs, chapter number 8, as we continue in 8. If you'll remember last week, we started chapter 8, and Solomon in this chapter is contrasting the sin and the results of sin from chapter 7 that he went through in great detail. He's contrasting that with the glorious light of wisdom and its results here in chapter number 4. Wisdom and its results. This is done on purpose, as I mentioned last week, to comparing on the way that he is with the darkness of sin and the light of wisdom. He does it in a similar way that a jeweler does, as I mentioned, as he puts a diamond or a piece of jewelry against a black velvet or black felt to really make that piece of jewelry or that diamond pop, so that it'll perk the potential interest of the one that may buy. And so he's doing these things on purpose. So as we're looking at wisdom, the light of wisdom maybe, and the darkness of sin, we've got to address the same question that we've asked every single week. What is wisdom? I hope by now everybody knows what it is. Wisdom is the application of the knowledge of God. Godly wisdom is the application of the knowledge of God. What we can learn, what we have revealed to us, learning from His interaction with humanity, learning from in the New Testament church age as He lives inside of us and speaks to us from the inside, as He speaks to us through His Word, through music, even through nature itself. He gives us an understanding of who He is and what He requires. We gain the knowledge of God through His law, as I said, His Word, interaction of mankind and Christian, the New Testament, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. We gain knowledge from all of those places. Once we have gained this knowledge of God, we can apply it to our daily lives, and that is living a life of wisdom, like we've looked at every single week. Solomon again is using poetic language in this chapter to refer to wisdom as a she or a her, and other terms like that. He illustrates that she has a purpose and a plan for all that she does. She has a reason behind all of the warnings that she gives in our lives. And last week we studied verses 1 through 9 and how wisdom, or she, gives perfect instruction to all that will listen. Wisdom gives perfect instruction to all that will listen. Again, through His Word, through the Holy Spirit, what's knowable of God, she gives perfect instruction. We looked at how wisdom is standing in a place where all can see. She's made herself available. She is seeking out individuals willing to listen. Anybody and everybody that'll listen, she'll speak to. And she is speaking out words of warning and words of wisdom, all these different things. And so that's where we were last week. This week, we're going to look at her influence in our life as she speaks and as she is seeking after us and as she's trying to instill in us wisdom and instill in us the realities of how to apply the knowledge of God. We can see her influence taking shape and taking hold of everything that we do. Our verses for this evening are verses 10 through 21, but we're not going to get through all of them. But I'll go ahead and read them. Proverbs chapter 8, starting in verse 10. He says, "Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance are evil, the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. Counsel is mine, sound wisdom. I am understanding, I have strength. By me kings reign and princes decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. Riches and honor are with me, yea, durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I lead in the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of judgment, that I may cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasury. There's a multitude, an absolute multitude of promises, and that's one of the reasons we won't get through all of this. But if we allow the knowledge of God as we apply it to our life, if we live out a life of wisdom, it will have an influence on us, not just guiding us in the steps and in the initial jumping off point of wisdom, but it will guide us every single step of the way. It'll influence us to where we'll be making the right decision because it has molded and shaped the way that we think. That's a pretty interesting thing that's revealed to us. But chapter 8, verses 10 and 11 is what we're looking at first. This is wisdom's distinction. Wisdom is different than others, and because it is a choice. In these first two verses, Solomon uses money and things as conflicting possibilities to choosing wisdom. Instead of choosing wisdom, there are some that will choose money and things. Instead of listening to and applying what is right to their life, they'll choose money or choose things, choose personal advancement rather than living out the life of wisdom. The Hebrew word translated in verse 10, the very first word, receive my instruction. That word receive in verse 10 isn't just a willingness to accept something, a willingness to allow it to be placed in your hand or under your care. It's not like as an illustration, maybe somebody giving you a bad Christmas present. It's not like, oh, thanks. This is great. Right? It's not just a willingness to accept something. It's not like accepting or receiving a ticket from a police officer that's pulled you over. Right? You'll take it, but that doesn't mean that you're happy about it. That doesn't mean that you're willing and ready to pay for it and those kind of things. So it's more than just a willingness to accept something. The reality or what is being said here, even though a bad Christmas present or a speeding ticket, both of them can be received, the word used here gives the idea of getting something or taking hold of something with the intent of utilizing it. Like it's being offered and you can't wait to snatch it out of their hand. Like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning and they've opened all their presents and you say, I've got one more. And they know it's what they've been asking for all year, right? They snatch it out of your hand because they're excited. That's the idea of the word used here, receive, using it, taking hold of it, getting it with the idea of utilizing it as soon as possible. Kent Hughes said it like this concerning this verse, receive my instruction, not as silver and knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared. These verses, Kent Hughes said it like this concerning these verses. He says, see the word received. It is translated and it means to take. We have a choice what we are going to take and grab hold of and not let go. It is a choice that we make to grab a hold of something and not let go. That's the idea of what's being said in verse 10. The instruction is to take it above silver, above gold, above rubies, because we can't have it all. We can't have it both ways. It is an either-or choice, because whatever we take a hold of is going to take hold of us. We will love either wisdom or we'll love money or things. We will most deeply care about what we are or what we have. We can't live for two ultimate goals or masters at the same time. We know Jesus said that in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So he says, purposefully take hold of these things rather than riches and rather than the things that this life has to offer. Purposefully take hold of wisdom, because if you don't, He goes further to say, Kent Hughes, take hold of wisdom and make your money serve Christ, or you will end up serving it, money, without Christ. Take hold of wisdom and use your money and the things that you have to serve Christ. Otherwise, you will end up having all of those things without Christ at all. That's a pretty powerful statement. What you take a hold of takes a hold of you. So make sure you're taking hold of the right things. As far as what's being said, he says, receive, take hold of my instruction on purpose, not silver or knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is better than rubies. Of the things that are mentioned here, we recognize wisdom's distinction. Wisdom is a choice. To take hold of it is a choice. And then we see, as far as the comforts are concerned, the things that are mentioned in these two verses, silver, gold, and rubies, that would be an example of everything that we would consider valuable in our life, or that our world would consider valuable. Silver and gold and rubies, some of the most valuable things, treasures, all of those things are referred to here. They are recognized in these two verses as the things of this world. And the danger of what he's saying here is the things of this world will fall short. The things of this world, the gold and silver and rubies, they'll depreciate in value. They're fleeting. The value may go up and down through the ages, but overall, the reward of them depreciates in value. Not just depreciating in value, but this gold, silver, and rubies, they can be taken from you, or they can be lost. They can be forfeited. Someone could break into your home and steal it, rob your bank and steal it. They can do all these different, it can be taken away from you. You could go through a terrible situation where you have these huge doctor bills to pay, and a lot of you in here know what I'm talking about. That money can be gone just like that. The reality is, they're not just depreciating in value and can be taken or lost. But even if we save up every dime that we have, we collect all the gold, silver, and rubies that we could possibly get through this life, once you die, you can't take it with you. There's a story of a guy who goes to heaven, and he's very rich. He has an enormous amount of gold that he's accrued over his lifetime. And he gets to heaven, and upon entering, he says, look, there's one thing that I desire to bring with me to heaven above everything. And they said, what's that? He said, all of my gold, because I love it so much. And they looked at him and said, why in the world would you want to bring asphalt to heaven? Understanding that the roads in heaven are paved with gold. We understand what that is. But the reality is, what we see as valuable in this life is nothing in eternity. We can understand that, but not just that. We can't take it with us. All we're going to do, if we save up all this silver and gold and rubies and have all these treasures, all these things that life can offer, when we die, all it's going to do is make our kids fight and make our grandkids and great-grandkids spoil rotten. It doesn't do us any good. So what is it that he's saying? You need to choose on purpose. Choose wisdom. Take hold of it, because what you take hold of is going to take hold of you. If you'll take hold of wisdom, it'll lead you through and help you in all these areas. But if you desire money, if you desire things, when you get to the end of your life, you'll be most miserable. They can be taken away. They depreciate in value. They're temporary. They don't even last for eternity. But on the other hand, the things of God, the wisdom that he's telling us to take hold of, what are the promises that go along with that? Well, the things of God are ever increasing in value. And here's what I mean by that. Me learning and coming to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, that is, in living out my faith and all those things, that's part of the application of knowledge. That's part of being a wise individual or living a wise life. and that in and of itself is enriching, and that in and of itself is going to grant me access into heaven, and that's absolutely priceless. But as I go through this life and God gives me more days and more days, if I apply that wisdom of all of what the Word of God says and living the kind of life that I'm supposed to and being the witness that I'm supposed to and giving the way that I'm supposed to, all of those things, if I live out this knowledge, it's ever increasing, because my testimony can be used to reach others. By the way, that's a reward that I get to take to heaven with me. My personal witness is a reward that I get to take to heaven with me. If my personal witness has influence on an individual, if I'm able to lead somebody to Christ, if the life that I live so impacts my children that it causes them to come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, you can understand how this knowledge and the riches that wisdom offers, it's ever increasing. It doesn't run out. And when we get to heaven, it'll all be given back to us as it passes through as gold, silver, and precious stone, as it's tried by fire. Those are crowns that we get to give back to Jesus Christ, and they will last for eternity. The only thing that I can take in this life that really belongs to me, the only thing I can take to heaven is my family. And so it's an ever-increasing thing. Instead of it depreciating in value, the riches that wisdom offers is ever-increasing. Not only that, but it can't be lost. It's going to continue to gain momentum and continue to increase in value as more and more of the wisdom that God gives through the knowledge of Him, as it increases, it's going to provide more and more and be more of a blessing and more of a blessing. And those blessings can't be taken away. Treasures of this life and money and things, they can be lost, but the rewards that come as a result of living a life of wisdom, they won't be lost. We may lose sight of them as we get older. Dementia may set in, and we may forget everything that God has done, but I can tell you there's an accurate record being kept in heaven of all the works that I'll ever do, whether they're for Him or whether they're for me. And everything that's done for Him, He will remember, He will reward, and I'll be able to give back to Him and say, this is what I've done for you. They can't be taken away. They are eternal. John Phillips said about these verses, silver and gold and rubies, even the abundance of these things are simply that. It's just things. But unfortunately, we know that things can dominate our lives. The poor man may spend his life worrying about things that he doesn't have. The rich man may spend his life worrying about the things that he does have, while Jesus says in Luke chapter 12, verse 15, a man's life consists not of the abundance of things which he possesseth. Things are deceptive, John Phillips says. They hold our thoughts captive so that we become so occupied with the material, the physical, the temporal, the transient, that we miss out on the rich eternal blessings that comes as a result of living a life of the wisdom of God. We miss out because we get so focused on things. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 and 20, Jesus says, lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and thieves break through to steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and rust, nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. It's not about what we can get in this life. The old phrase used to say, he who dies with the most toys wins, but the reality is, he who dies with the most toys still dies. As a comparison, verse 11 says, wisdom as a comparison to all that this world has to offer. Second part of 11 says, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Have you ever wanted something in this life, wanted something so bad that it consumed you? And this isn't me trying to get you to admit to anything as a trick. I mean, has there anybody in here ever really, really wanted something, like when you were a kid, desiring a toy? I've already mentioned a couple of times Christmas, but begging and dropping hints to mom and dad that this is what I want. And every time that they say, what do you want for Christmas? That's the first thing that comes out of your mouth, like the Red Ryder BB gun, right? You work for it. You save for it. You do everything that you can to get it. And you beg grandma and grandpa, and you cut grass. And if you live in the frozen north, you shovel snow. All so that you can save up your money so you can afford this. And as you're saving up your money, you're counting it every day to see how much closer you've got to getting this toy or this thing. Is anybody like me? Is anybody remember acting or feeling that way concerning it? Has any of you ever had that kind of a feeling towards something, wanting it so bad, doing everything you can to get it, but then once you had it, you felt dissatisfied or let down? When I was a young teenager, and Brian will know what I'm talking about maybe, and the Alexanders and the Vasquez, they'll know what I'm talking about. When I was a kid, I wanted a pager, a beeper. You guys remember those? I wanted one of them things so bad. It was a status symbol at school, and that's what I wanted. And I did that very thing. I saved up everything that I could. I wanted to get one. I didn't just have to get the beeper, but I also had to get the monthly plan that went along with it. And I did everything that I could to save up for it. And really, by the time that I got it, it was so outdated. And by the time I actually had it, I was like, man, this thing is stupid. Because by then, everybody had those little Nokia telephones, and they're able to make a phone call, and all I got was a handful of numbers. I felt let down and disappointed, and even though I worked, and even though that's what I wanted, I felt let down. That's kind of the picture that's being painted here. As far as things that can be desired in this life, there is nothing that compares to wisdom. Because there is nothing in existence that can offer the same complete, lasting satisfaction that wisdom can offer. So that's why he says, and all the things that may be desired, everything that you could possibly get, everything that you could possibly set your heart's affection on, working for and saving for, whether it be gold or silver or rubies or things, none of those things are to be compared with it, because nothing compares to the wisdom, the lasting satisfaction, the complete lasting satisfaction that wisdom offers. That's wisdom's distinction. The second thing we're going to look at, verses 12 and 13, is wisdom's dealing. We see, first of all, where wisdom dwells. It says, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. The word that's used in verse 12, the word prudence, it means good sense. You know some folks, let me read what I put here. The idea is that wisdom at work in an individual is always accompanied by common sense. If we take the knowledge of God, apply it to our life, and live a life of wisdom, the Bible is telling us that wisdom brings with it. It dwells with common sense. They're inseparable. They can't be taken apart. Have you ever met someone that was crazy smart but had absolutely no common sense? I know some people with an extensive knowledge in things like history and science that would make me look foolish if I ever got into a trivia contest with them concerning either of those things. And at the same time, some of the things that they say and some of the things that they do and some of the things that they think are so dumb, I don't even know how they've lived this long. Have you ever met anybody like that? They have all the book knowledge in the world, but when it comes to common sense, gone. Well, according to these verses, wisdom dwells with common sense. That's what the word prudence here means. They're inseparable. It brings with the knowledge, or wisdom brings with its knowledge about God. It brings it down to earth so all of us can understand it. It brings what's knowable of God, what God requires of us. It brings that to a place where we can understand it and how it applies to our life. If we're to apply that knowledge to live a life of wisdom, we need a little bit of help and instruction on how to do so. It makes the knowledge of God practical in our life. It helps us relate to the knowledge of God in our everyday life. One of the best illustrations of this can be seen in Jesus' addressing the Pharisees in Luke chapter 14. The knowledge of God says this. The knowledge of God says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. That is a command of God. That's a law of God, right? That's one of the 10 commandments. So knowledge of God says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Wisdom says, the wisdom of God says, I'm going to follow the commandments that God gave and the example that He left, as God created everything in 6 literal days and then He rested. So He gave us an example to follow and He gave us His law. So wisdom says, I'm going to follow that example and do what has been required of me. But life often says this. Sometimes work will be necessary on the Sabbath. I hope I didn't lose anybody there. This isn't an excuse to disregard it or an excuse to willfully disobey what God's told us to do and not to do. Here's what Jesus has to say, Luke chapter 14, verse 5, and answered them, saying, which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen into a ditch or into a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? I mean, it's common sense. It's easy for us to understand that if we have, by the way, these animals that it's talking about, these are the livelihood of the family. Which of you, if you had an animal that was paying your bills, which of you, if it fell into a ditch, wouldn't pull it out, wouldn't do everything necessary to get it out of the ditch? Sometimes in life it's necessary to work and not rest on the Sabbath. Don't let me lose you. Jesus said this in Mark chapter 2, verse 27, and He said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. So, the knowledge of God says, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. Wisdom of God says, I'm going to keep God's command and I'm going to follow His example. Life says sometimes work is necessary on the Sabbath. Here is what prudence or common sense says. As I said, prudence, dwelling with wisdom, working in our life. It gives us an understanding of how to bring it down to our level where it makes sense. According to these verses, prudence or common sense says, do what needs to be done while you continue to honor His day and keep it holy. Working those things together, not doing a disservice to God, not taking advantage of it, not making excuses, but doing what's absolutely necessary while continuing to honor His day and keep it holy. I think it needs to be said right here that wisdom and prudence will never lead you to sin. It will always lead you away from sin. And so it's not an excuse. We can't say, well, common sense says, I only make this much money, therefore I don't have to give, or I shouldn't give because I can't pay my bills. Well, that's not what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. God gives us wisdom and understanding. He expects us to fulfill and to follow His law, but He also gives us prudence on how to get those things accomplished in our life. It'll never lead us to sin, prudence or wisdom, obviously. The wisdom, the knowledge of God. It'll never lead us to sin. It'll always lead us away from sin. So that's where she dwells. She dwells with or I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge of witty inventions. This is an interesting verse. There are a lot of differing opinions as to what the back half of this verse or the second half of this verse is saying. Verse 12, there's a lot of different opinions. I'll give you my opinion. It's my opinion. You can take it the way that you want. But my opinion, based on what it says just before it, as far as dwelling with prudence, and what it says after, the fear of the Lord, is to hate evil, pride, arrogance, the evil way. The froward mouth do I hate. According to those things and what is continually said throughout Scripture, my opinion is that it is describing what wisdom produces, or what wisdom and not produces, but what wisdom and prudence at work in the individual's life does. What it does as wisdom and prudence working together, giving you common sense as to how to accomplish what God desires and what God wills and what God commands. As prudence and wisdom work those things out in your life, laying it out for you, this is what wisdom does. It leads to advances and benefit that benefit humanity, such as medical benefits, technological benefits, mechanical benefits or advances, all of those things. As knowledge works in our life, it doesn't just give us common sense, but applying the knowledge of God and living out this life of wisdom, it advances us to the point where we can do things that better humanity, better our society. By the way, a perfect example of that is, as I said, we're doing the recording and placing these things on Facebook and placing them on YouTube, and we have our website, and we had church outside, and we had a little box that was able to transmit everything I said and all of the announcements right into your radios in your car. Those are all good things, right? I feel as though that's what he's saying here as far as increasing and helping us to advance for the benefit of humanity. So wisdom gives common sense, and it leads us to advancements that take care of not only us, but everybody else. That's what wisdom does, and that's where wisdom dwells. But here are some things that wisdom despises. Wisdom despises. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. One of the foundational elements of godly wisdom is to hate all things evil. You can't say that you have the knowledge of God, an understanding of what He requires, an understanding of what He hates or what He loves. You can't say you have that understanding and that you're applying it to your life if you still have a love for things that are evil. That's what he's saying. As it's working out its way, as it's working out its influence in our life, as it deals with us and gives us understanding. What wisdom despises, the first thing it says is pride, thinking too highly of oneself. By the way, this isn't a racial statement at all, but there are a lot of folks that are tearing up a lot of things in our country as a result of pride, thinking too highly of themselves. Having the idea of I'm better than you, and here's why. I'm smarter, and I deserve more, and I can do more, and look at me, look at what I can do. Wisdom despises that attitude. The word arrogance that's used, the next word, it says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogance. These are two words that are very similar as far as their origin and the way that they're presented to us. They're very close to the same word, but there's a little bit of a difference. You see, pride is thinking of oneself too highly, and the arrogance is the expression of extravagance or showing off. The idea of this is what I have, and this is why I deserve it. right? Showing off what you have, showing off wealth, and lifting yourself up and boasting of all that you have as if to say, I'm worth it. In the same way, we can see that pride leads us away from salvation, thinking too highly of ourselves, leads us away from salvation because we have to recognize ourselves as sinners. But also this way of arrogance, this extravagance, I don't need anybody to die for me. I'm a good person at heart, and this leads us away from the Lord as well. Pride and arrogance the Lord hates because it takes people away from Him. It leads them away from Him. Another thing that's said here, the evil way. This is a wicked lifestyle. God hates a wicked lifestyle. Wisdom hates a wicked lifestyle. Why? Because it destroys the relationship between God and man. It destroys the influence of mankind to other men and women. It destroys the ability of the Lord to use them to reach the masses. Destroys lives, destroys families, destroys hopes. The Lord hates. Wisdom hates, despises the evil way. And the froward mouth is the last thing he says. Perverse speech of any kind, whether it be lying, whether it be lewd speech, saying things that are that shouldn't be said, whether it be taking advantage of, sowing discord, whether it be gossip, whatever those things are, perverse speech, using our mouth for a purpose that are using our mouth in a way that it wasn't designed to be used, or it wasn't. It's not the will of God for us to use it that way. That's the froward mouth. Wisdom's influence, as we've looked at, the first one, wisdom's influence as far as things that can be desired in this life, as far as everything that this life has to offer. Wisdom's influence is of greater value than gold, silver, or jewels, or anything that we could ever even think about or ever possibly consider desiring after. It's more valuable because it is it has a lasting value. It's eternal, what wisdom does. Wisdom's influence at work in our life as an individual will lead us to understanding and advancement while leading us away from evil attitudes and actions. So wisdom will lead us to advancement and to understanding, a better way of living, a better life. It'll lead us to prosper, if you will, and at the same time as it's leading us towards something, it's leading us away from something. It'll lead us away from sinful, evil attitudes and actions. That's where wisdom dwells. That's what wisdom despises. And we're going to look next week at wisdom's dependability. Why we can depend on wisdom. As she is speaking, she's standing, she's seeking out any individual who will listen to her. She's speaking, giving us words of wisdom to live by. As she is making those things known, she wants us to know that she is more valuable than anything we can desire. And if we allow wisdom to work in our life, applying it, it'll lead us away from what God despises and towards things that advance our way of living. Let's pray.